The wind brought the smell of rain and salt when Emma descended from the train into Seaford. The tiny seaside town stretched out unobtrusively along the top of chalk cliffs and pebbly beaches. To most it was tranquil, for retirees and seagulls, but to Emma it held the promise of isolation and stimulation. She leased a tiny fisherman's cottage with whitewashed walls, battered shutters, and an ideal view of the sea. Within, the cottage groaned like an old man's chest. The windows shook with each wind, and the sea smell clung even when the air was dead. Emma opened her laptop, notebooks, and bundle of half-conceived ideas. Seaford, she whispered, inscribing the name in her journal. A place for stillness, a place to listen. Her friend Mira arrived later that afternoon, cheerful and bright as always. She brought herbs, candles, and a teapot, declaring she would keep Emma company through the weekend. You can't write about ghosts alone, she teased. Who says I'm writing about ghosts? Emma asked, smiling. Mira shrugged. This place looks haunted enough. That night they had their tea on the pebbled beach. The sun was low, painting the sky with gold and rust. Gulls circled overhead and the crashing wave rhythm silenced the world. It looks untouched, Mira remarked. As if time overlooked it, Emma nodded. Just what I need. But as they remained silent, an odd splash resounded across the bay, too bulky for a bird, too muted for a wave. They faced the noise and beheld it, a small wooden skiff bobbing just beyond the tide line. Paint was peeling from the wood, the hull splintered, and on the side, pale white letters read, Marina's return. Was that here before? Mira inquired. No, said Emma. I was looking at the beach. It just materialized. They edged cautiously towards it. The boat was unoccupied, a loop of rope lying inside. There were no footprints on the shingle. The air inside the circle seemed to thicken, to be colder even than the wind. Emma hesitated before reaching out to touch the name, but Mira caught her wrist. Let's go, she breathed. The sea whispered behind them as they turned away. The two ended up at a dimly lit pub close to the pier later that evening. Locals were seated in silence with pints being nursed. Jack was standing behind the bar. A fisherman who had the appearance of one having seen too much water and too little sunlight. Emma inquired nonchalantly, Do you know who might have a boat by the name of Marina's Return? The name changed the air. A few heads turned and then away. Jack's face grew harder. You saw it? He whispered. Yes, on the beach a little while ago, Emma said. Is it yours? Jack shook his head. Nobody anymore. That boat was Marina Hawthorne's. She was a young woman who lived down by the cliffs. Sailed out one evening years ago. Storm rolled in fast. They picked up her boat the next morning. Hull was empty, rope still attached to shore. Whatever became of her? Emma inquired. Jack's eyes fell to the ground. Never found. Say she fell. Say she jumped. But people around here say the sea took her. And every now and then it gives her back. Emma scowled. I mean what I said. Don't go strolling along the cliffs at night. Tide's quick. Doesn't always bring you home. The words stayed with Emma long after they'd left the pub. On the walk back to the cottage, the waves sounded louder, nearer. That evening, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, gazing out at the black sea. The moonlight shimmered across the waves like something alive. Then, distant but clear, she heard it, a voice, soft, pleading, Help! Me! Emma stood still. She put her ear to the glass. The whisper rose again on the tide. Help me! The following morning, Emma reported what she'd heard to Mira. It was the wind, Mira said, although her face was troubled. It said, Help me, Emma insisted. As plain as day. She walked to distract herself. The air was cutting, the water below turbulent and gray. The path cut perilously close to the edge, where chalk dust dropped like snow. Partway up, Emma noticed an old cottage half buried in the ground. An old woman stood beside its fence, gazing out to sea. Morning, Emma said. The woman turned, pale, cloudy eyes staring. You're the one who's staying in the fisherman's house, she said in a brittle tone. Yes, I'm Emma. The woman nodded. Maria. I've lived here my whole life. You saw her boat, didn't you? Emma hesitated. How did you... Remember, the sea does, Maria cut in. It always reminds her when it's time. Marina Hawthorne was my niece. They never did recover her, but I still hear her voice when the tide comes in. The hairs on Emma's neck rose. You think she's still out there? Maria's eyes remained pinned to the water. She's waiting, lost between tide and time. The cliffs took her body, but the sea keeps her soul. By the time Emma could question further, Maria was gone, leaving nothing but the whisper of her shawl on the wind. The sea was noisier that evening. Mira had retired early, but Emma couldn't sleep. She opened her journal, attempting to write, but the words were too heavy. The lights began to flicker and then went out. The room was only illuminated by the moon now, casting silver shadows on the floor. Tugged by an unfamiliar feeling, Emma peered out of the window and stopped. The boat had returned. Marina's return rode in the surf, swaying gently, though still at tide. Emma pulled on her coat and went out. The beach was empty, the only noise the gentle hiss of stones beneath her boots. She arrived at the boat and touched the weathered wood, worn to cracks. In the boat, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small metal nameplate half buried among rope. It said, Monsieur Hawthorne, 1982. Then there was the whisper again, nearer, behind her. Emma. She spun around. Who's there? The beach was deserted. But out in the shallows, something stirred, a white shape rising ankle-deep from the water. It was a woman, her hair wet and long, her face indistinct behind the mist. Find me, the shape whispered. Emma retreated one step. Marina? She breathed. The woman raised one shaking hand and nodded towards the cliffs. A light flickered there, like a lantern dancing in the blackness, up there. Before Emma had a chance to answer, the sea churned. The figure disappeared under the wave, and the boat broke loose from its mooring. It floated away, spun once, and vanished into the fog. Emma ran. The trail up the cliff was steep and thin. Wind ripped through her coat and whipped her hair into her face. She ascended until she could see it. A tiny lantern flickering softly on the overlook. Someone waited. Marina? Emma called out. The figure turned. Not Marina, but Maria, the old lady she'd seen before. The glow from the lantern etched deep shadows on her creased face. You shouldn't have come, Maria said, voice shaking. You told me she's waiting, Emma said. How do I help her? Maria's eyes sparkled. You already do. The sea summoned you because it knows you will hear. You need to lead her home. At midnight, when the tide is at its peak, you will see her boat once more. Let her pass. Don't glance back. Why me? Emma asked. Maria smiled weakly. Because you listen to the sea. Then, before Emma could say anything, Maria disappeared into the fog, lantern and all. At midnight, the sea was filled with light. The waves glimmered under a bruised sky, and the air had the scent of rain. Emma stood on the water's edge, barefoot. And as Maria had said, the boat floated in again, Marina's return, faintly glowing, as if the moon itself had filled it with grief. A shadow emerged from beside it on the water. Marina. Her gaze locked with Emma's. Boundless. Icy. Filled with yearning. Now, she breathed. Emma waded into the water, the ice gnawing at her flesh. She paddled the boat out, her hands frozen from the salt. Marina stepped aboard in silence, her dress laden with seaweed and foam. The waves gathered, enveloping them with a low, boundless roar. Be free, Emma breathed, tears biting at her eyes. Marina raised her head to the horizon. There was a flash of wind sweeping over the beach, and for an instant, the sea parted, radiating from below. The boat moved forward, growing faster and faster, until the figure merged into the light. Then it vanished. The sea grew quiet. The wind was extinguished. Only waves' gentle withdrawal lingered. Emma alone, dripping wet and shivering, gazed out into the blackness where light once was. When morning arrived, the tempest had passed. The sea stretched flat and still, as if nothing had occurred. Mira sat beside Emma, who sat by the window, her eyes far away, her journal open to a page covered with one sentence repeated, she is free. What happened last night? Mira asked softly. Emma didn't turn. I helped her, the woman from the sea. She was waiting to go home. Mira frowned. Emma, you've been out there all night. There's no one. Emma finally looked at her. There was, and now there isn't. Gulls floated lazily overhead, their cries reflecting from the cliffs. A fishing vessel came in towards the shore, its name worn and illegible from distance. The tide lapped peacefully against the rocks, whispering secrets the sea alone could hold. When Emma closed her book, she looked once more out towards the horizon. Light played upon the waves, just for an instant, like a waving hand in farewell. The sea reveals the truth, she whispered. In Seaford, everything comes to light eventually. And with that, she turned away from the window. Behind her, the soft hum of a woman's voice carried on the morning wind, not crying, not begging, but singing, a song the sea had been waiting to complete.